Hey guys, it's been a minute. Hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to another episode of the Myles Show. This is actually a very interesting episode, and my guest today is going to be a professor, and we're going to be discussing about issues concerning when you are arrested and what are your rights as an arrested person, or also when you get in a situation whereby you're arrested. Because I know some of you have experienced like a wrangle with the police force, and this is what you should do when you get to have a confrontation with police officers. So hope you get to learn something from this, and I hope you can be able to share with your friends, share with your family members so that they can understand their rights when they get arrested or even when you have a confrontation with police officers. And my guest is a good friend of mine, and he has also taught me in campus, and he's a professor. His name is Professor Simeon Singi. Thank you and welcome, Prof.
Thank you, Myles. And to Myles viewers, I really appreciate this opportunity. As Myles has explained, I am Dr. Simeon Singi. I'm an associate professor of criminal justice, so I know it's a lot of words, but what I basically do is I teach young minds in understanding issues pertaining the criminal justice system, issues of fair trial, and basically to be a good citizen. I'm also a practicing lawyer. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I am a commissioner for oaths and notary public, but I'm also licensed to practice law in Tanzania. So I'm also an advocate of the High Court of Tanzania. I'm also a commissioner for oath and also a notary public. What I do more than the other, so as I've explained, I have basically two professions. I do more of the teaching, and I really like teaching. I like interacting with young people, and you also learn a lot from young people when you interact with them. But on the legal side, though I am a practicing lawyer, I basically engage in what we call pro bono legal representation. So I represent clients who are indigent, so clients who are not able to pay legal fees, and I do this through the government. The judiciary has a system whereby individuals who are unable to pay for legal services, especially those who are charged with serious crimes that attract the death penalty, those are given an opportunity to be represented by counsel, and the judiciary remunerates those individuals who agree to serve as pro bono lawyers. So they give you a little bit of a fee, but it's really in making sure that the constitutional rights of these individuals who are charged with serious crimes are respected. And the Constitution of Kenya, I'm holding the Constitution of Kenya 2010. This is a very important document that can help you understand what your rights are as a citizen of this republic, but also as a person who lives here in Kenya. So those are the things that I do. I'm a father of teenagers. My children are almost your age, Myles, and I also like my role as a father, and so perhaps that's all I can say for now.
Okay. So, Prof, some of my viewers, there's a time I did a small research of what people want to ask about, when they get arrested. And these are the questions that I'm going to ask you is what they have told, what they want to find out. And number one of the questions they asked is, what's the easiest way to get arrested? I don't know why they want to find out that, but that's among the top questions.
Way to get arrested.
Yes.
Well, it's a good question, and as if you remember in school when you were in class, I normally would say that offending the law is human nature. There is nothing unique about violating the law. In fact, people who are in community prison today, it doesn't mean that they are better off than ourselves. Yeah? The only thing is that they probably are unlucky. You know, they got so unlucky, and they, you know, got into contact with the criminal justice system, and they are now serving time in prison. So there is really nothing unique about criminality. Criminal behavior is learned. Okay, that's the most I think most tested theory of crime. We have other theories of crime that explain why people engage in crime. But I think the most prominent one and famous one is that crime is learned. So crime is learned like any other behavior, like singing a song, you know. And sometimes criminal offenses, breaking the law is sometimes influenced by the people who you interact with. So if you have friends who have a tendency of violating the law, you may end up getting to do the same. So basically, to answer your question, the most famous way that you said, what's the easiest way to get arrested
yeah.
is by committing an offense, by committing a crime. And when you do that, a law enforcement officer, a police officer, or sometimes a citizen could effect arrest. Okay. So there's what we call citizen's arrest. So even another citizen can arrest you if they deem that you have committed an offense. But you know, mostly it's law enforcement. There are a number of people who commit crimes who end up not being charged with any crime. You know why? Because when they're engaging in an offense, probably there's no law enforcement officer around. Yeah. So I think the most, you know, the way in which you can get into contact with law enforcement is when you engage in a criminal offense.
Nice. So still on that point, yeah. And I guess that's why this was the other most asked question. I think, and I've heard from most people that they say that they really get anxious when their phone are confiscated during maybe when they are put in the cells.
Yes.
So most people asking what happens to their phone when they get, you know, arrested. What do the police officers do with their phone?
Yes, that's also a very good question. I think it borders on what we call the rights of an arrested person. Okay, what are your rights when you are an arrested person? Again, these are rights that are enshrined in the Constitution of Kenya and in Constitution of most countries. Okay, the United States of America Constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America, has a famous amendment. It's called the Fourth Amendment. Okay, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of Kenya deals with issues of rights of arrests. Okay, the rights of an arrested person, the right to seize the individual's property. Now, the Fourth Amendment is very clear, which is not very different from the provision of the Constitution of Kenya, which I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. But there are limitations that are put in place for the purposes of protecting an individual who comes, a citizen or an individual who comes into contact with law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't have all this, you know, leeway and right to do whatever they want. Number one, they must establish that a crime has been committed. And then once they establish a crime has been committed, then they can either effect an arrest or apply their discretion. You remember that term we used to talk about in class?
Yes.
Their police discretion. Sometimes they may come across an individual who has offended, has committed an offense, but sometimes they may not arrest. They may issue a warning, say, don't do it again. We have found out that you have done X and it's a crime, don't do it again. So police can use their discretion, law enforcement discretion, to make sure that they protect and serve, because those are the two objectives of law enforcement, to protect and serve. Now, coming back to your question, the Constitution of Kenya is very elaborate, and I came with the Constitution intentionally so that I don't speak things from my head.
Yeah.
Okay? so that we actually see what it says. Now, the most important article that deals with issues of the rights of an accused person is Article 49, okay? Article 49 of the Constitution of Kenya. And this document should be, the Constitution of Kenya these are the wishes of the people, the Kenyan people. So this is fundamental. So everyone should make sure, every individual should make sure that they understand what the Constitution of Kenya talks about. So Article 49 talks about the rights of an arrested person. So as I go through this provision, I hope I'll be addressing your question. What happens when your phone is taken away or confiscated by the police? So the accused person, an arrested person, has a number of rights. There are many. One, the arrested person must be informed promptly in the language that they understand. One, the reason of the arrest. Why have they been arrested? Second, an individual who's arrested has the right to remain silent. And I will elaborate this more. Has the right to remain silent. Third, the arrested person must be informed the consequences of not remaining silent. Okay? And this is actually the role of the police. When a law enforcement officer arrests you, they have to inform you of this. We call that a warning. They have to inform you. There are other rights that an arrested person enjoys. Constitutional rights to communicate with an advocate and other persons whose assistance is necessary. So you can call a lawyer if you have one, but you can also call a friend, someone who you deem is going to be helpful to you. A friend, a parent, okay? So you're not really supposed to be alone in this case. So the requirement of a lawyer is one of them, but you can call a friend whom you think can assist you. Other rights that an arrested person enjoys is not to be compelled to give a confession, okay? Because you remember, you have the right to remain silent. So you have no obligation, even if you think you have committed a crime, to volunteer to tell the police officers, that you have engaged in crime, unless you voluntarily want to do it, okay? But you are not obligated to confess. Yeah. You also have the right to be held separately from people who are serving a sentence. Now remember, when you are arrested, you are presumed innocent until you are found guilty. And who does that? It is the court of law that does that. When you are arrested, it does not mean you have committed a crime. You are presumed innocent. And the presumption of innocence is one of the constitutional provisions or constitutional rights that you enjoy if you come into contact with law enforcement because they deem you to have committed a crime. Yeah? So those are important. You cannot be detained with people who have already been found guilty by a court of law. So there has to be a separation between the two. Why? Because you are presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. There are other rights, but I'll probably allow you to pose a question if you have. But now your phone cannot just be taken away by law enforcement. Yeah? Cannot be taken away, even if it's a proceed of crime. There has to be a process that must be followed. But remember, you are still presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. So if they believe that your phone has been is part of criminal proceeds, is part of the commission of the crime, what can be done is if the police deem that that's part of evidence, there's a procedure that must be done, and they should not just take that phone away, because it's the court of law that will be able to deem whether it is proper for your phone to be confiscated. And this, I think, is true to any piece of evidence that is deemed to be part of, or is going to assist the prosecution in finding in satisfying the burden of proof in criminal cases. As you know, the burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt. So there's a process, and even telecommunication companies are forbidden to just share information of clients unless there's a court order that says, okay, Myles is accused of committing a crime. The prosecution must make an application before a court, and that application must satisfy a particular threshold. That there's reasonable ground to believe that Myles is engaging in some criminal activity, and we want to be able to know who he has been calling or what information is stored in that device.
This is just a random question.
Yes.
You talked about the telecommunication. They don't have a right, to give out information. I don't know if you have noticed something, and this I'm speaking out of experience right here in Kenya. We see that, for example, if you don't use your number for so long, they give that number to someone else. I've been in a situation whereby I call someone else picks up the phone. It's because now, since even right now myself personally, I have a SIM card that I haven't used for some time. I'm sure, like, if I put it on a phone, like, it won't work. So is that right? Like, that's something I've actually asked myself personally for quite long. I feel like it's quite wrong, but is it allowed, especially in our country, Kenya?
Yeah, so the answer is no. And I think it used to happen like that, I understand, before SIM cards were properly registered. So now, you remember, the government came up with an initiative that all SIM cards must be registered. Now, currently, if your SIM card is registered under your name, which means you produced a duly government identification document, either your national ID number or passport, that number would remain yours even if you don't use it for 10 years. Because, again, the government has decided to take these initiatives in one way to help to combat crime. So that they can be, if a phone number has been used to commit an offense, then it is easy to use that phone number to trace, who has engaged in crime. But I agree with you, that is what was happening before, and it really was a big problem, because you may be implicated in the commission of crime that you have never been involved, just because your phone number being inactive. And phone companies are there to get profit, and when they see this number is not bringing money, they give it to another person.
You have told us about the rights of an accused person, and actually you've talked about the important ones, and I'm glad. And also there's something my viewers have asked, and it's that why are the rights of an accused very important to an individual? Why is it very important to know your rights as an accused person?
Yes, that's a very good question. And you remember, sometimes in the 1990s, when President Clinton was the president in the United States, there was an attempt to amend the Constitution of the United States of America to include what they called the Victim's Bill of Rights. Because there was an assumption that, there are no rights prescribed for a victim of crime. And it seems like the criminal justice system is leaning or favoring, quote unquote, the accused person, in the expense of the victim. And I think that argument is misplaced for a couple of reasons. One, a person who a person who has come into contact with the criminal justice system, a person who is accused of a crime, an arrested person is a vulnerable person. Remember, criminal offenses are crimes against the society. They are not really necessarily crimes against an individual. They are not. That's why a criminal offense, the parties to a criminal offense, is the republic versus the individual. So imagine, the state is a very powerful entity. So if you are accused of a crime and the state machinery is leaning on you, there's a high probability that your rights can be violated. And that's the reason why the rights of an accused person are constitutional rights, so that the rights are protected to the extent that it is known whether an accused person is guilty or not guilty of a crime. Because not all arrested people are guilty of whatever they are being accused of. So if you don't afford them these protections, then the likelihood of their human rights being violated is so high. And that's the reason why these protections are put in place.
Still on the accused, the rights of an accused, another thing I think it's quite important, at least, even if someone might not know all the rights of an accused person, I think if you know like three of the main rights, I think there are like three main rights one should know, like no matter what, from across all ages, from children till adulthood. What advice can you give to our viewers there who might see that, oh my God, those rights are so many, but I'd like to know the main ones? So if you can let us know like some of the three main rights of an accused person one should know are what and what.
So basically, and I think you're touching on a very important point here, that these constitutional rights are basic rights, and even children who are in primary school should start learning about these rights, because we call them basic rights. So it doesn't mean that criminal justice students ought to know these things, or law students in that fact, but every citizen. And if young children in primary school start to learn about the basic rights, then that would bring about a high civic literate society. And it's very important to be highly civic literate. Now, basically, the rights of an individual, an arrested individual, are very simple. And before I repeat those rights that I said, because they are just that, complying to a lawful order is very important. So even if you believe you have not committed a crime, even if you believe you haven't engaged in a criminal offense, when a law enforcement official, when a police officer puts you under arrest, it is very important to comply. Do not, do not contradict what the police officer is ordering you, because he or she is a police officer. He's a lawful officer, so you need to comply. But you have rights too. You need to verify whether they are a police officer. And police officers know if they are putting an individual, they are arresting an individual, they first of all need to introduce themselves, show their ID, okay? So those are things that they know. I know sometimes police officers may become a little bit irritable and say, no, I cannot, but they know that they are trained, and they know that if they come into contact with an individual and they want to place them under arrest, they need to introduce themselves. Yeah? And more importantly, when they are not in uniform, because even if a police officer is not in uniform, he still can effect an arrest. So comply. Do not resist arrest, okay? Because resisting arrest is actually a crime by itself. So if you comply and you follow these rules that are enumerated under 49, that once a police officer effects an arrest, so first of all, they need to introduce themselves. If they don't introduce themselves, you need to politely ask law enforcement to introduce themselves. Okay? So you can request them their ID. Most of the time they wear their badge number in their uniform, so you can see that. Okay? But you can insist to have an ID. Every law enforcement officer has an ID. Okay? So once you're satisfied with that, the police officer, you need to also ask the police officer why they're why they are putting you under arrest. And it's here in the Constitution. So they have to tell you in simple words why they are effecting an arrest. And they have to warn you to remain silent. So as I said, you have no obligation to say anything. Even if you think that you indeed engage in a criminal offense, you have no obligation to say that. And the police officer cannot coerce you or force you to confess, because that they know, right? So and because there are consequences attached to not remaining silent, because whatever you're going to say can be used against you as evidence in the court of law. Okay? So to bring it very, to bring it down to normal talk, number one, when you come into contact with a police officer and they want to effect an arrest, they say you're under arrest, comply. Do not resist, comply. But then request the police officer to introduce themselves. And a well-trained officer will also warn you, say you have the right to remain silent. You don't need to share with me, to tell me, unless you voluntarily agree to say, to confess if you have engaged in a crime. So those are the basic ones. But also there's the duration of time you need to remain in detention, which is important. The 24-hour rule, okay? And I think most people know that, and young people, I think that's a very important rule to know. Yeah. So the 24 hours, so the Constitution says you cannot be in detention for more than 24 hours, unless it's a weekend or it's a holiday. Okay. So you must be, if you are detained, if you are under arrest, the officers must ensure that they produce you before a magistrate or before a judicial officer within 24 hours, unless it falls within a weekend or it's a holiday. There's an exception to these rules, but the detention can be more than 24 hours. But the key point is you must have been produced before a judicial officer. And the prosecution can request, that you be detained more than 24 hours. But you would have already been, before a court. Yeah. And if that doesn't happen, there is what we call an application. It's a writ. W-R-I-T. It's a writ. It's called habeas corpus. Now, the writ of a habeas corpus is important because this is technically requesting you to be brought before a court. Yeah? And this application is an important one. It's also under the Constitution. It's important to make sure that people are not put in detention and are not produced before a court of law. It's the court of law that would adjudge whether you have committed a crime or not.
Still, when on terms of being arrested, yes. I've just remembered that there's some time back whereby you'd see whereby there was some political, Kenya became so very political. Like I can say the political dramas that we used to see, yes. Especially some specific politicians, whereby you see police officers come to your house, and the situations I've seen, especially with these politicians, police come, actually they break the door, they come and they just, when it comes to the news, we don't know if, what happened before we see that the police came to the house and or broke down the door and all that. So the question is that, and this is what most people ask, is that what happened? What are my rights, or what should one do when police come knock into your door? Because I actually believe that when they come to your to your place or to your private property, they should knock and maybe introduce themselves. Yeah. But what if in a situation whereby they don't do that? What are some of the rights? What you should do when maybe a police? Because I know, especially in America, sometimes if the police officer doesn't come with a warranty, they don't open the door for you, and actually they leave until they come with the warranty.
Now, you have given an example of the United States. In the U.S., in America, they have what they call a no-knock warrant. A no-knock warrant is where they don't knock the door and they just bust in. Yeah, and these are cases where, for example, an accused person is probably accused of very serious crimes, and perhaps there is a presumption that the accused person may be a flight risk, or the evidence that will be used to secure a conviction may be destroyed. So there are no-knock warrants, and no-knock warrants are bad. They have resulted in some deadly cases where people are shot who are have nothing to do with the crime. Yeah, we have a number of cases resulting to that. But there are different types of searches. There are searches searches done with warrant, and searches that are done without warrant. So law enforcement know. And in those cases, so in the case where police come and knock in your door and ask to search, you need to ask them whether they have a warrant or not. And if they do, they will show you. If they don't have a warrant and they bust in your house, again, comply, because they're law enforcement. Your rights can be reinstated later. So if it's an illegal search, then you will make an application before court that this was an illegal search, and you will get remedies out of that. But again, it's no use to resist because, bad things can happen to you. You can be you can be harmed. Yeah? So comply. I believe law enforcement, most law enforcement are well trained.
Yeah.
Okay, they know what they need to do, and they know what they don't need to do. You remember in class we talked about this thesis in police studies called the rotten apple, the rotten apple or the rotten barrel thesis. Is it, when we talk about police misconduct, is it a question of a rotten apple? Does it mean it's a problem of one police officer? Or is it a problem of a rotten barrel of apples? Is it a group of police officers who misbehave? And research has shown that it's really the question of a rotten apple. It's not really a question of a rotten barrel. It doesn't mean that police officers, all of them are badly trained and they are unethical. They are just a few. And these few are the ones who bring, a bad name to law enforcement. So again, back to your question. Police come to your door, they are knocking. Of course, as I said, they need to do a number of things. They need to introduce themselves. We are law enforcement officer. You are supposed to request for their identity. They will provide you that, and they will explain to you why they are there. It is illegal for them just to bust in and do whatever they want to do. And I don't know, you raised a hypothetical question. I don't know of cases in Kenya. I have not heard of these illegal searches, pretty much. Most of these politicians whose houses are searched, you see it's a lawful search. Of course, they go early in the morning, yeah,
on a weekend.
Yes, early in the morning, because they want to make sure that the evidence is preserved.
Yeah.
What they are looking for doesn't go away.
Yeah,
so
sure.
yeah.
I was just asking that question because technically I think it's quite important, even if not necessarily like you as a politician, but you as just a normal citizen. A police officer can come to your house and search you, but what do you need to do, or what is, it's very important.
Yes.
All right. So thank you, Prof. That's all we had today about being arrested.
Yes.
I'm grateful, and I hope to our viewers out there, you have learned 1, 2, 3 things. And I hope you will, as the Prof has really emphasized, always comply with the police officers, no matter what. Even if they come and search you illegally, just comply. You can use that in court, and you will get, everything will be done right for you. That's all we had today. Thank you, Prof, so much, and I hope we get to bring you on board again, because personally, as much as I learned all that, it has actually, refreshed my memory so quite well. And I'm very tempted to continue, but those are the most common questions and the most questions that people ask out there.
Yes.
So thank you, guys. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. And also, you can also share to a police officer. It's very important to educate. So yeah, share with anyone out there. This show is for everyone. Thank you so much, and also thank you to the police officers for doing the right thing and also for protecting us. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.